I went to see Perfect Days, which began showing in Japan on December 22nd last year. The director, Wim Wenders, is an award-winning German master. In 1982, The State of Things won the Golden Lion at the Venice International Film Festival. In 1984, Paris, Texas won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. In 1987, he won the Best Director award at the Cannes Film Festival for Wings of Desire. And Perfect Days was screened in the competition section of the 76th Cannes Film Festival in 2023, where Koji Yakusho won the Best Actor award. The following circumstances led this director to make Perfect Days, which depicts the ordinary days of a toilet cleaner in Tokyo. This movie was originally planned to promote the Tokyo toilet, a project to transform 17 public toilets in Shibuya Ward into a new and unique ones. And the production was then commissioned by German film master director Wim Wenders. Although the original plan was to create a short art piece, the director was impressed by the service he received and the cleanness of public places during his stay in Japan, which led him to reconceive the film as a full-length work. How does the quality of service and cleanness of public places that Director Wenders was impressed with in Japan connect with the content of the film Perfect Days? First, I would like to touch on the content of this movie and then answer this question at the end. In this movie, a middle-aged man named Hirayama, played by Koji Yakusho, lives alone in a cheap apartment in Oshiage, overlooking the skytree. Every morning, he wakes up in the dark and drives his wagon to work, heading to public toilets in Shibuya, the unique toilets built as part of the Tokyo Toilet Project, and he carefully defines every nook and cranny one after another. It is implied that the main character, Hirayama, has some kind of past that led him to his current lonely life. But it is never said what it is. He is just dedicated to his work. Moreover, he always has a satisfied expression on his face. It's like a Zen monk devoting himself to the chores at a Zen temple as part of his training. That's understandable, as Director Wenders initially had Hirayama projecting the image of monk. However, this does not mean that Hirayama was a monk in the past. Rather, the director seems to envision a man who is an avid businessman, but who harbors emptiness in his heart. When his emptiness reaches its limit, he abandons his entire life and chooses to work as a toilet cleaner. Hirayama loves the trees he encounters in his daily life. He especially loves the beauty of sunlight filtering through the trees at a shrine surrounded by trees during his lunch break. The sunlight filtering through the trees is called komorebi in Japanese. The beauty of komorebi in each moment overlaps with his dedication to cleaning the toilet. The days of cleaning the toilet are like a series of moments of komorebi through the trees. This image is similar to that of monks at Zen temples who sit in meditation, chopping firewood, and cleaning the gardens and hallways. Hirayama cleans the toilet with all his heart, just as a monk does Zen meditation with all his heart. Every moment of his cleaning is fulfilling. This attitude hints at one of the important teachings of Zen Buddhism. Zen emphasizes performing all the daily tasks you encounter mindfully. It teaches that being mindful and dedicated to the task at hand is the way to achieve enlightenment. However, Hirayama himself may not have been conscious of this kind of Buddhist teaching. When Hirayama gave up his career as a businessman and became a cleaning worker, he may just simply find the fulfillment of living in the brilliance of each moment, like sunlight filtering through the trees. There are times when there are slight turbulences in his ordinary but fulfilling days. A little fuss with a less enthusiastic young co-worker and his girlfriend. His interaction with his niece when she suddenly ran away from home and moved into his apartment. And his interactions with the hostess of the bar he frequents on his days off from work, and her ex-husband. However, to Hirayama, even these slightest breezes in everyday life can be as beautiful and endearing as the momentary fluctuation of slightest filtering through the trees as they sway in the wind. When I watched this movie, I was moved by the long scene at the end where the camera follows the expression of Hirayama's face as he drives the wagon. I couldn't hold back my tears as I looked at Hirayama's smile and the richness and beauty of his expression. It was a scene that made you think it was no surprise that he won the Best Actor award for this movie. Now that I have said this, I am finally ready to answer the question I started with. The question was, how does the quality of service and the cleanness of public places that Director Wenders was impressed and inspired by in Japan connect with the content of the film Perfect Days? In other words, how does the high quality of Japanese service and the cleanness of public places connect with Hirayama's way of life? It is a well-known fact that Japanese products are valued and trusted around the world for their high quality. In this sense, Japan is said to be a manufacturing powerhouse. The reason why Japanese products are trusted is because the Japanese people have an attitude towards work that does not neglect even the smallest details, and the result of this can be seen in the quality of the products. Japanese people are well known and highly praised around the world for their never neglecting attitude and attention to detail when they work. The attitude of taking pride in one's work and paying the utmost attention to it can be seen in Japanese people of all walks of life. This is a characteristic that can be seen in common both in customer service in the service industry and in cleaning workers who keep the city clean. Director Wim Wenders, who knows Japan very well, must have been impressed by the attitude of Japanese people. In a sense, Hirayama is a man who perfectly embodies this Japanese working attitude. Let's look at one specific example. This is what Ikiteru, a Korean YouTuber living in Japan, was talking about with a young friend. The friend is a Korean who has worked for companies in both Korea and Japan. His friend said, one of the things that was stressful at Korean companies was that, for example, rather than going through the process systematically in order, they would skip steps or skip inspections because they had to deliver quickly. When something went wrong, the people involved would fight with each other. And there were times when different departments were blaming each other, and even though it wasn't my fault, I was criticized by other departments, which caused me a lot of stress. In Korean companies, even if there is a process, they sometimes skip it in order to hurry. But in Japan, they are really thorough. If there was a process from 1 to 10, they never skipped from 1 to 3. And they check again and again. There are people in charge of checking each part, and because they proceed while checking, there are almost no mistakes. Mr. Ikiteru agrees and says, that's why Made in Japan is famous all over the world. And as you'll understand, if you go to Japanese restaurants, even small ones, various staff members create each piece with great care. And his friend goes on to say, seeing the way Japanese people work gave me a sense of trust and belonging, which was great for me as a worker. I gave an example of a Korean person from a video I happened to see recently. But what lies behind the worldwide trust in Made in Japan is the way Japanese people approach work, as described here. Yes, it is an attitude that does not neglect each process and detail. The working attitude of the Japanese people is reflected in Japanese products, which earns them trust from around the world. So where does this attitude of Japanese people come from? I think that one of the reasons behind this is probably the Buddhist tradition. Japanese people tend to think of everything as a door or the way to enlightenment. Not only Butsudo, the process of training in Buddhism, but also Kendo, Judo, Kyudo, archery, sado, tea ceremony, shodo, calligraphy, and kado, flower arrangement. And there is also a business do and a baseball do. All of these words, which end with do, represent the idea that it is important not only to hone your skills in each field, but also to train as a human being there. I think Japanese people almost unconsciously understand that there is an aspect of human training in any sport or job. At that time, the most important thing is to do the work mindfully and single-mindedly, without thinking about any trivial thoughts. Even if you don't call it cooking do or cleaning do, most Japanese people have traditionally and unconsciously learned that any job involves spiritual training. That's why we don't neglect any details or small steps in our work. However, as a businessman, Hirayama may have lived in a chaotic situation where profit and loss were fiercely colliding with each other. Feeling empty, living in such a world, he gave up his entire career and became a toilet cleaner. And when he devotes himself wholeheartedly to his work, he must have been able to find a sense of fulfillment, like a brilliance of sunlight filtering through the tree every moment, or komorebi. German director Wim Wenders may have sensed something deep and traditional about the Japanese people behind their attitude toward customer service, work, and keeping the city clean. That's probably why the director originally envisioned Hirayama as a monk. Although Japanese people are hardly aware of it, each of them has inherited the good traditions of Japan in their way of life. I think the director intuited that. That intuition crystallized into the life of a man named Hirayama in Perfect Days. Hirayama may be the true Japanese figure that Director Wenders understands, and when we look at Hirayama's way of life, we remember something important that we have forgotten.